again, I want to welcome everybody to the what the heck month is this? This is October edition of the IndiePie meeting. So my name's Hendryx-Parker. You've already met me. I'm going to let Brad give a quick introduction to himself, and then we're going to start talking about this today.
Guys, it's an absolute pleasure to be with you tonight. As Calvin mentioned, my name's Brad Fruth. I currently have the pleasure of serving as the Director of Innovation at Beck's Hybrids. Beck's Hybrids is an 85-year-old company based in Hamilton County, Indiana. We're the largest family-owned retail seed brand selling corn, wheat, and soybeans to farmers in 80% of the row crop market. So that's a little bit about us, and excited to share with you the shenanigans that we got into. So,
yeah, so I think everyone here will agree AI is rapidly advancing. There's so much innovation going on a daily basis, which is, it's getting more approachable over time. I think what we're seeing is nearly everybody in any kind of setting is probably using ChatGPT to help them in some part of their day, and whether it's coding or writing a correspondence or a letter. But AI can be a threat or a multiplier, and I'm on the multiplier side of that equation. I truly believe where we're going with this is actually going to help take away that mundane work and actually let our brains do the really interesting stuff that we're all here to do anyway. It's a shame that so much of our brains maybe go to waste, but I think we've found a solution for that in AI. And the success of these AI projects, as we'll see, really leverages how well you can manage your data. All this still comes down to data. If you're throwing garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. And I think we'll show that as we go through this process. The problem is managing my mouse between two screens, one in front of me, one behind me. All right, this demo tonight, it has live code that you will be able to run yourself. There's a QR code here that actually goes to this GitHub repository underneath 6 Feet Up. If you wanted to scan that, start perusing the code, I will show off some of the code. You can open up a code space. I'll show that as well, and play with the things I will show tonight. Nothing here is, major state secrets. It's actually, I think, helping people understand better how this stuff is working under the cover. So it's been part of our intention was to actually spread how this works and how people can use it, and how people can leverage it for good.
I mean, we're not screen scraping their IP and their identity off their laptop.
No, we're not. Just careful what QR codes you scan. I swear mine is legitimate. There are no bad things going on there. Okay, and I already mentioned this kind of in the intro about today's AI journey. That was just my intro of like where we're going with this whole talk. Now, the true deal here is that we're dealing with data. And as many of you can attest to, I've seen a lot of data people actually in the room, and more of us are becoming data people, whether we like it or not, or they're doing data engineering, some kind of ETL or data science, or now AI and machine learning and training. There's people who are way smarter than me in this room right now about many of those topics that can probably go way more in depth on this. But I think it's important for everyone to realize that data has quirks. When you're thinking about if you're ingesting any kind of data you're throwing into these LLMs, you could be throwing a PDF file in there that came from, I don't know, Adobe InDesign, and the designer, to hide elements, just kind of shoved them off to the side of the screen. The text is still in the file. The LLM will still see it as you feed this text into those kinds of things. This is the kind of problems we're talking about. Tables, I mean, good luck. Understanding tabular data in a PDF format where it's not coming out of a spreadsheet where it's been semi-structured. We're really talking about this unstructured data. I mean, things that have been OCR'd and scanned. The insanity of where your data can come from can only multiply. But if you can fix those kinds of problems, if you can make your data readable for an LLM, that is where the real, unlocking the value of that data comes. And actually, if you can spice it up with additional metadata, additional kind of tags here and there, that's where the large language models really actually kind of excel at all this. I don't know, you want to talk a little bit about the data problems you all have?
Yeah, so one of the things that we did with our LLM proof of concept is that we had about 23 years worth of data that we published in these books. And so one of the things that came out really, really fast is that while it's interesting data, Glenn that helped us on the project was quickly ready to burn the house down because of tables. So it's very easy to look at a table and to know things like green is good, red is bad. The numbers should go up, not go down. But when you're working with an LLM, it doesn't always know that. So the standardization of that data threw us a couple curveballs. So we had to create a couple different ways to be able to read that data. But there's also, I would say, some tricks to it. we went out and pulled every single newsletter that we could, every blog article that an agronomist had written, anything we could get our hands on that was text-based, doesn't have to look pretty. We tried to ingest that. Talking with some friends that have done this, even things like recording your Zoom calls, taking it to transcript, things like that. If you can get it into a text format, that is always good. So it's still amazing the things I think we take for granted, like table data and PDFs. There's some wonderful tools out there, but there's still some massaging because we look at something and it's very easy, but for the model, it's not always that easy. But standardization is key, I think.
Yeah.
Some of the data that we looked at, they changed the table from one year to the next, and that requires a whole new data format to be able to ingest that data.
It's that workflow, splitting your data up into these logical chunks and having it be well understood, like kind of physical textual chunks that can be tokenized into these embeddings. Actually, there was a really good article that came across my Slack earlier today that gave a great visual understanding of like the term embeddings. You'll hear embeddings, hear vector databases, and these kinds of things talking about how they're categorizing these tokens. And I'll make sure I forward that or put it into the IndiePie Slack because it really helps you put a picture to what's going on behind the scenes, which will make you think more about how I'm going to actually arrange those kinds of chunks of data that are coming in, because certain words in the English language can have different meanings, same word, different meanings in different sentences. And so the AIs are obviously gotten a little smarter about that, but how you feed it in helps it understand better.
But I mean, even like if you look at tabular data, we had a number of studies that showed an ROI. And obviously you look at that, and if you're looking at ROI, you want the highest number. But if we didn't actually say in the text, the highest ROI was this or that, then it's difficult for it to just pick that kind of stuff.
Yep, exactly. I think what's next to talk about is, once you've kind of wrangled a lot of this data in place, is going to be, what is your tech stack? And I mentioned already that the tech is moving at just a breakneck speed. Things are changing on a day-to-day basis. Luckily, there's some great open source projects out there that are helping us manage that level of insanity, but you've got to keep up with them. I think it's been a key bit here. And if you have questions about that, Glenn did a lot of this work on the LangChain piece for the project. But LangChain plus Simon Willison, who's one of the founders of the Django project, he's gotten really into data over the years with his dataset project, and that kind of led him down a path into building the LLM command line tool and library that you can use. And I'll show all these tools, plus GPT for all, which actually allows you to run those models on your local laptop, which we'll do as well. We're actually going to show off doing all of those things so you can kind of get a feel for what the differences are between running against the GPT, OpenAI's GPT API, running against your local LLM running in here, using LangChain and using tools like LLM. So
I'll just to piggyback on that. One of the things I really appreciated was the thoughtfulness that went into our project, was that it was designed to bring different models in and out. So OpenAI is the one we're talking about today, but as different models come in and out, having the thoughtfulness that I'm going to have the ability to plug and play different APIs, we think is a huge strategic strength to the POC that we were able to put together. So
yeah, I think this is, and you need to basically keep an eye on the market and what they're doing. I think when we started this project, we started with LangChain and Llama Index. We ended up maybe dropping Llama Index in favor of LangChain, but I would still keep an eye on the LLM and GPT for all. And I don't have an example in here of the Llama Index stuff, but we'll show off the other ones that are in that tech stack listed right up there. Now, I think the real power, as everyone has experienced this through ChatGPT, is that large language models give you this like search meets natural language. Like you get to talk to the system and it seems to understand you and give you back interesting answers. So what we did for this project was produce a simple UI, kind of mimic the ChatGPT interface, because people are very familiar with that user interface. But as the challenges go, we're cataloging the information as language. It's not structured into a SQL database or anything like that. These things are getting cataloged and then indexing, various parameters over that. So it's interesting to think about it in a different way, because you are literally talking to the model and using that English language to massage what you get back out of it.
Well, and one of the other things that I really appreciated was that if you structure it in this way, you have the ability to create your own IP. So when you create it in this, I'll use the word containerized, but not in a technical term. Like when you put it in this box of a model, the beautiful thing is that every time you spin it up, your model gets smarter and it gives you the ability to create your own IP. So what we did with our language model, we're not feeding back into OpenAI. We're not doing, it's literally our own IP. And so we also found there's some creative things that you can do when you spin these up and you have people log in. And it really creates some separation versus the people that are just ingesting the OpenAI API. You're essentially making their product better, which is not bad if it's one for one and one for all, but ours has, you know, proprietary specific information. So we wanted that to be housed in our own repo, and we were able to pull that off. So those are the architectural things that you need to know before you just jump into this.
Right.
Where's the model going to be and who's going to own it?
And based on that, you know, being able to, like you said earlier, swap out an API version that may be running somewhere else in someone else's cloud versus using a self-hosted version of those models.
And then you also have to know, I think we actually tried to use like 4.5, and like there's some weird stuff that happened. So
on 4, yeah.
Yeah, so you have to be prepared for, okay, I'm going to use a different API. I'm going to have to tweak my modeling a little bit so that it answers correctly.
Yeah, and actually that's something I'll show off.
We would call that, what was it, spicy mode or something like that?
Well, I think we've got, that's actually what we're talking about here.
There you go.
We created personalities so that you could actually change, you know, they're kind of got their own system prompts that could give them their own personalities. And, you know, we named them after Star Trek characters, so you could kind of get a feel for what they may respond as. So you can imagine that, you know, Lieutenant Data is going to respond very accurately, very concisely, not a lot of commentary. But maybe Riker might get a little more passionate with his answers and a little more creative. So, and so this actually gave us the ability to launch multiple personalities into the same app, test them, see what the feedback actually was, and understand when we actually were getting better results, poorer results. You know, road test them for a little while and see how they feel without having to go change any code. We could actually create new models, specify in here. I think it's actually the next screen. Yeah, so here we can actually kind of tune, you know, on the fly how we want those models to behave, you know, basically changing a lot of the different parameters of the prompt and the model as we associate it, and then keep save that personality and save this personality and then compare and see how they worked for us. Another thing we did was we actually collected all the questions and answers that were going through the system. So as people are using the system on a day-to-day basis, we're actually able to put in maybe in an answer a ranking. Was this a reasonable answer? You know, kind of a 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 scale, like how accurately it was answered. We could even put in what do you call it? Professional.
There's a critique.
Yeah, the critique. Yeah. You could have the critique of it, and plus whatever an expert would actually answer.
Yeah. So this was really fascinating because we launched it kind of internally, and people were asking all kinds of stupid questions, right? Like, what's a tractor, or, you know, what's my favorite color, or, you know, what's so and so's net worth, and it's like, come on, guys. But the interesting thing was that we actually found some flaws in our data. And so, like, one of the questions I asked it in a live demo, which I would not suggest that you do, was, you know, how do you tell the growth stage of R3 in soybeans? So that's a common agronomy thing. And the response that I got back was, well, you can tell that it's R3 because that comes after R2, but before R4. It's like, yes, you are my smart aleck teenager, you know? So, but you're able to go in and critique that and say, if you get this question again, here's the authoritative source on that, and here's how I want to answer it. So even if you have it turned up so it gets a little saucy, like, you can still go in and tune that, which is how you can make your own IP. So our model was getting better and better with more questions. And if it got a little questionable, then we just hopped in. And you can also then, by doing it this way, you can critique how well the model is responding without being really intrusive into your users.
Right.
So,
and then without a code release too.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So at the end of the day, you basically now are custom tuning your own model that you can choose, you know, what you want to do with it. I think we also had the ability, we could assign a model per user too. So like when I would log in with the demo account, it was turned down. My project manager, he had the thing turned all the way up. So it took a bunch of creative things. But yeah, so it was extremely powerful to have the ability to critique and then refine that model. And it's very transparent. Yeah. So you're able to see exactly what's going on.
And I think a lot of this magic in enabling the critiques to come back into play is the fact that underlying, before we even get to the API calls into these large language models, is you've got vector databases basically categorizing groupings of data as you're going. So you may get a prompt, take a look at it and see what kinds of content do I need to pull in from the wealth of content that I've fed into the system, critiqued into the system. With other data sources we actually added into the system, which was the company directory. So you could find out, based on where your farm was, who's the person you should actually call who know most about what you're doing.
Yeah. So one of it, we actually ingested a bunch of stuff from the universities, and we actually had a couple issues where there was like a logic loop. And so one of the things that we learned is that when we would ask our question, we would tell it to cite its source. And then in doing that, it would expose the underlying data that was giving us that inaccurate viewpoint. So we could go in and kind of fix it. But I mean, most of the bad data came from IU, but that's part of
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. One other thing you mentioned, which was the fact that the system was built so it actually could remember who is talking to it. It would understand things like where your farm is, what kind of tractor you have, like what kind of plow or discs you have, like planters you have, those kinds of things, because those contexts will also ultimately give you better answers out of the system.
So that is something that during our demo, so we actually did this demo in front of our dealers to show how we're evaluating new technology, and they might not blatantly see it. But one of the things that was interesting is we also showed how we can manipulate it. So for example, we loaded the company directory in and we made a comment about one of the employees and how awesome they were. And so we blatantly put it in one of the models. And then I asked it who this individual was. And it was like, well, that guy's the best guy on the team at Beck's Hybrid. So it also showed that you can very easily, if we wanted to, if we knew the user in the back end, every time they hit chat, we could bulk load all the CRM data that we have and basically spin up a customized model for them so it would know where they live, what their order was, who their sales rep was, all this contextual data. And then at the end, we can tear it all back down. So it really provides a ton of flexibility for us to provide the best customer experience that we can with that chat service.
Yeah, and so in the end, you saw the Django admin screens. That should look familiar to anyone who's done any kind of Django. This part of the app is just, again, Q&A. It's kind of cut off at the bottom. You can't really see the prompt, but it was just a HTMX. So we reduced the total front end amount of code we were writing. It was a single page web app. It didn't refresh after every kind of like chat initiation. Try to keep the app then again as simple as we possibly could. So, but we still got a dynamic UI. It felt smooth and had enough kind of speed and snap to it that you didn't feel like you were waiting on an ancient.
Now, to be fair, we were validating technology. So we did tell Calvin and the team, like, don't spend a lot of time in a fancy UI. Like, we want to validate the technology and then show the portability of it.
And you can see here who's answering, like Lieutenant Data, how long the answers kind of took. We could also put in there how many tokens were consumed, so you can kind of start tracking the costs of these various calls against whichever APIs. And I'll give you a hint, GPT-4 is going to cost you a lot of dollars as opposed to like GPT-3.5 Turbo, which will get you pretty darn good results.
I think we spent less than $20.
Yeah. Well, when I was putting together this presentation for a rally over the summer, over the week I was kind of testing and doing all the demos. I think I spent about $9 on GPT-4. And then when I did a recent project, I used 3.5 to produce about 300 recommendations, like single paragraph recommendations, about 300 multiple iterations of running through that. I think I spent a grand total of 7 pennies. I could rub those pennies together and produce lots of content. It was incredible. So let's actually talk about building your own ChatGPT based or GPT based chatbot. That code repository is, again, right here for anyone who's interested in it. What I'm going to show you is based on that code. So we're going to go quickly over here. Stay over here. Right here, I've got a code space spun up. You can see the presentation. This is what you'll get when you go check it all out. Though it looks like a lot of gobbledygook, but there's actually a pretty good README here that kind of gives you the rundown of what we're looking at. Basically, it's this presentation in README form because we wanted to help people out. And again, once you've got it here, you can say make check, make setup. That will ask you for your OpenAI developer API key. So I've already done that as long as my session didn't time out. Over here, it looks like I think we're good. Let's see if this and there's a make file in here that's going to have a bunch of targets. If you just type the word make, you'll get all the various targets that are interesting for you to look at. So to start, the very beginner ones, this is where I recommend is you're going to just type make ask OpenAI. And that will use your API key you put in, talk to OpenAI, and it asks us, we ask basically, and if you look at I'll show you the README, because that's probably more interesting. But that's actually using the API from code spaces. This is not on my laptop. This is using, just spinning up a Google code space, or Google, good Lord, GitHub code space. So you don't even have to have a powerful computer to play with this stuff. You can do this online using their tools. Now, if we look at the make file, what that did was ran here. What's the easiest way to get started with a large language model? And so that used the Simon Willison's LLM library. And so from a command line, if you've got the default model, we just picked, you basically set the keys, gets us all set up, and away we go with asking various models. Now I'm going to switch back over to my local computer for the rest of this demo, because otherwise it could be painful. This is a little slow, some of these machines. When you've got an M1 or an M2 Mac, it gets really fast, which is kind of fun and a lot more easy to use. Let's go back over here. Bingo. Oh, you can see the people online. Okay, if I can find my screen. Here we go. Is that big enough for everyone to see? OpenAI. So I'll run this is running locally on my laptop over the internet here at 1150 Academy. The next one we're going to look at is actually going to be the Ask Orca Mini. So this is interesting because it's going to use GPT for all and the LLM tool we just looked at. So we'll do it first here. Ask Orca Mini. So that's actually installing a couple dependency libraries. It should have the model already on my computer. Yeah, it did, because otherwise it would have taken forever to download. It downloaded the Orca 7B model to my laptop. Luckily, it's cached on my system, and ran this inside of the LLM tool as just basically a swappable large language model. So if you go out to like Hugging Face and want to try different large language models, you download those to your local machine. The LLM tool has a set of tools for actually doing that. If you look at the LLM command line tool, woof, what's going on? Looks like I got the wrong LLM here. So one thing that's, I'll kind of showcase this. Yeah, LLM VM, that's what it is. So I'm using virtual-ms here, and you'll see why in a moment. So the LLM tool is going really slowly. I guess I need to, I probably need to give it something. It's trying to send nothing to OpenAI. So with this, we can actually look at the models. So if we want to look at models, I think list is the option I want here. Yeah, list. So my system right now is aware of all these various models. You can see right here, I've got 3.5 gigabytes downloaded. What's nice is it actually tells you how much memory you're going to need approximately to run these models on your machines. So that's important when you're on Google Code Spaces, because you have options there about how big of a VM you want to launch. So make sure you launch one of the bigger ones, otherwise it'll take forever, because it basically goes into swap and it's not fun on the cloud. So that's how you can run a local Orca Mini LLM based model there. The actual, let's go into the make file. Oops, not the commits. So in that make file, what we did there was basically install the LLM GPT for all like add-on or plug-in to the LLM tool, which allows us to use GPT for all. And then we said use the Orca Mini 7B model, which went and downloaded it. If it was already downloaded, it just starts using it. And I asked the same question: what's the greatest way or best way to get started with large language models? And we saw that it gave us some actually Python example code, it looked like, in the output up here. Yeah, it did. Like, here's a simple code to actually create a simple chatbot, and that came straight out of that one was the Orca Mini, like running locally, which is kind of cool. So it didn't involve any internet connection, which I think is important when it comes to thinking about privacy. And if you've got proprietary data, this was something we wanted to do as a follow-on, I think later on with the Beck's project, was could we run these models in their own data center and then do fine tuning to the models themselves? Well, everything I'm showing you tonight is actually using embeddings. So we're not actually retuning any models. We're just using off-the-shelf models, but using vector databases, which I'll show you here next. So the next one is going to be as code. And this is probably the most minimal example of using Python code to talk to the like GPT-3.5 API. So this one actually asked it for clever names for a penguin, I think. Was that what this one was? Glenn, I think that's what we put in here. So if you look at as code, it's actually calling a Python file inside of here. It loads up the keys into the environment, calls the Python file, because remember, we never want to check our secrets into Git repositories. So we show good examples actually in here of not doing that terrible behavior. So the as code Python file, the whole first bit here is just how to get the credentials out of the environment. So again, keeping them safe, using LLM to manage them. You can do other things to even be more safe than this, but like this is still a good practice as to how to manage those secrets. Then here it is. We're going to get the 3.5 turbo model. We're going to get the API key, and then we're going to say 5 surprising names for a pet pelican. That's what it was, not a penguin, a pelican. And then we print the response.txt. It's incredibly simple. I think, when Simon put this together, he was thinking about how are humans going to interact with this API so they can make better, more cool tools out there. So this is a small example of interacting from the code level. The next example I'm going to show you, and we'll actually just do a demo first. And this gets into kind of more what like Brad's project was about with Beck. So I'm actually going to show you. So this summer, I presented this presentation at the Rally Innovation Conference. The conference has no search on their site to understand like when the sessions are, who the speakers were. You literally had to like come in and like click through speakers. And once you got into here, maybe you could click into a speaker's profile. I don't think it even linked over to the talk they were giving. No, it does not. So I can't see what talk Mitch Daniels is actually giving. Great past president of Purdue University. But his data is all in there. I was like, So I had Glenn and I schemed up a way. We scraped all the speaker data and all the session data off of the Rally website and put it into our own embeddings database locally so we could actually ask ChatGPT or GPT-3.5 or 4, whichever one you want to choose, about this conference that existed post GPT-3.5's cutoff data was at March 2021, I think is the time frame. So anything past that doesn't exist in GPT's world. Let's go play with it. So if you look at the Lang chain example, this is loading up that index. So what is the Rally conference? So in this case, we're doing a couple things. Is we're using a vector database locally that had all that data indexed, and we're asking it, using that as part of the prompt, we're sending to GPT-3.5 via the API, and sure enough, it knows about the Rally conference. So that website did not exist before May of this year. It was put together pretty darn quick. Okay, that's cool. Who are the featured speakers? Oh, look at that. I've got the list of the featured speakers. Let's see, what else want to ask this one? Oh, what studios are at Rally? Because they called their tracks studios. And so we should get a list of, ag, entrepreneurship, hard tech, software, hardware, or healthcare, and sports tech. It's pretty awesome. This is nice. Like I could deal with this instead of using their lousy site. Sorry, I didn't say lousy. I'm actually meeting with them tomorrow, I think, to talk about this. But I think this is really nice. If they had this on their site as a little chat bot on the side, it'd be pretty cool. Let's see here. Let's see here. Well, when is Calvin speaking? Oh, that's interesting. Who is Calvin? Oh, here we go. It knows about me because I'm one of the speakers. Now, why didn't it know me? What talk is Calvin giving? These things can be a little unpredictable. Yeah, there we go. I'm actually talking about innovation with AI and building ChatGPT-like apps. When is Calvin's talk? Ah, Where? How about that one? Uh, Sometimes you get great answers, sometimes you don't. Uh, what's that? No, we're gonna move on from this because that's enough. So it's interesting because I want really interesting information now. That this is just an advanced search engine. I've not done anything interesting with the technology here. I want to know who should Meng Chang network with and why. So if I'm like doing sales or business development and I want to know who I should be like meeting at the event, this could actually be really interesting. Oh yeah, now we're talking. It's like gives me the names, who they are, what insights and connections they may actually bring value to me. This is the real stuff. This is the real deal in my mind, where I've now extracted some kind of new valuable information out of all the data that I've thrown at it. Now, what's interesting is when you're using this, it's also throwing every last bit of history I had thrown at this thing in the prompt automatically. So I don't have to, I say, what is the conference? I don't even have to, because it already knows the rally conference. It's using the history to understand, this is using all of GPT-3.5 and asking it, what is the conference? Like, how does it know what conference I'm talking about? Because of all that extra context we're throwing up there with it as this thing goes in there. But I really wanted to show that. I'm glad this part of the demo worked. Now, these work better when you spend more time in tuning, and I'll talk about, that in the data problem is really where a lot of the magic lies. Where is my PyCharm? Here we go. So let's look at the actual code behind this one. Okay, move this out of the way. Perfect. Is this big enough for everyone to kind of see? Okay, and the code's all on GitHub, so you can actually just go check it out yourselves. Similar thing, get the credentials, because we're going to use GPT. So we go in, grab, as part of this loop, so the main function at the very bottom, all it does is set the logging level and throws us into the loop, like that prompt where like it's a REPL. I'm going to ask a question, get an answer. I'm going to ask a question, get an answer. That k equals 15 is how many documents that I query in my vector database locally am I going to send up alongside that prompt? So you can tune that. Like I want more content or less content based on how much I want to spend or how long I want to wait for answers to come back. So you can tune all these kinds of bits about the thing, whether you want speed, you don't care about cost, or maybe you do care about cost and you need to be a little cheaper. These are all the kind of things you can actually tune as part of those tunables we showed in Brad's application specifically. So when it's coming in to that loop, I'll start kind of top of that. It gets the credentials, it looks for a query, and so then it actually, this is part of the real magic here, is it does this loader of all the data in that data directory. Well, that loader in the data directory, if we go look at the data directory, this is where we mirrored down their website. So if you look at speakers, actually I'll look at the speakers, like list of all the speakers. Here you go. So there's all lists of speakers in here. Let's go find me. Here I am. So there's a index HTML. Let me tell you, this is like HTML barf with these whatever system that they're using, because you're going to see just a ton of like crazy. Well, I'm still in the header. I'm still in the CSS of this thing. Here we go. Lots of ULs, IDs, menu, some random hash number, and every time they generated their site, that number would change. This is like awesome funness you're going to have, like stripping interesting content out of here, because you really care about some specific content on the page. I don't care about all this HTML. I want to be able to get down to like this. This is the text you probably just saw the answer come back for, where it's my whole bio. It stripped it out and gave me just exactly my text of my bio on that page. So you're going to build extractors. I mean, a lot of your work, like should be no surprise to data people, is going to be how do you extract the actual meaningful text out of these bits of information. So if we look at like extract speakers, we read through all the HTML, and then we use Beautiful Soup to look for some specific attributes. It can get a little trickier if you're looking at the extract all. Yeah, here we go. We're using some XPath bits. So if they rebuilt their site and I went and go reindexed it, this would break on me. You can see we were kind of testing and playing to see if we can get down to a simpler version of that XPath. But a lot of your time is going to be spent, how do I pick and choose the interesting bits of data off these pages? And maybe you're going to pick and choose interesting bits off the pages and actually annotate them with kind of little tags, like, maybe this was a what page and what volume and what year this book, this section came out of, so that when you do want to ask for a citation, you can actually get valuable references to where this information came from the text you're feeding into the system. Yes. We didn't. This is a very simple first kind of pass at doing this. Glenn, you didn't look at using any kind of language models to extract the text, did you? And Glenn says no, I didn't think so. But that's absolutely in the realm of possibility. I mean, one of the problems I was working on, I mentioned using GPT-3.5 to produce all those recommendations that we did, like 300 recommendations for about 7 cents. What I would tell ChatGPT in the prompt, give me back the information format as well-formed JSON. And I give it some more documentation about, I want the JSON to look like this, these keys, these values. And about, I don't know, 1 out of 100 of those entries or 2 would come back with invalid JSON. And guess what it was? It was an extra comma in the JSON, so it looked like a Python dictionary if you were writing good Python. Well, you could actually feed that back. I put an exception in there. If you parse the JSON and it's not valid, the exception handling would be send it back to ChatGPT and say, fix the validation of this JSON and give it back to me. So you can use you can use those iterations inside the LLM with the LLM library in your Python code to do this really, really easily. So let's go back here to LangChain example. So that's that magic. This is loading it into, what's the name of the database there? Someone can help me. Oh, here it is. We're putting it into the ChromaDB. So if any of you aren't familiar with the ChromaDB, I think it's just kind of a schema layer on top of SQLite is what you basically got there. So we take that data, load it into a Chroma DB vector store. So as we hear people talking about embeddings and vectors and vector stores, that's exactly what's going on here. There's a very simple example for you to kind of, check out and look at. And once you get your vector store, you can now use that to basically create your index. And the index is what we're going to pass in as we're querying. So we're creating the chain of all of our conversations using the chat OpenAI. I've parameterized models at the very top. You can switch it out for 3.5, 3.5 turbo, put in GPT-4 and see how slow it is and how much it costs you when it's being slow, and change a lot of the like temperature, like how creative it's going to be. A lot of those metrics you can change right here to tune your models and play with it. And then we create a prompt session. So this is using the prompt toolkit from Python. If anybody's played with that, it's a lot of fun. That gives you the ability to have like the up arrow, down arrows, auto completion, some nice fanciness there. But we could also give it a word completer, so I could tab complete certain words inside the while we were doing the demo. So if I was like, what is the rally? Oh, it's not working. Am I not getting? Oh, it could be. There it is. Yep. So hit R, capital R, was case sensitive. Nice call. And it auto completes based on those things. That's nothing to do with LLMs. That's literally just a prompt toolkit. This is my little plug for that awesome little library. Use it in all your command line tools because it's a ton of fun. Oh, we also turned on VI key bindings, so you can hit escape and use VI key bindings to edit your line. I'm just super geeky. Sorry. I will get back to the actual topic at hand. So we go into the prompt, load up. This is just prompt toolkit stuff again, making it nice, that pretty green. And we do the queries. So if it's Q, we could exit. If we've got it persisted, we don't have to reload all those documents into the vector database. We can just load them from a pre-existing library or pre-existing file that actually is in the repo. So that way you don't have to go generate it on code spaces because it'll fail. Sorry, a little bug there. And then here we go. We start passing in some kind of stock text of our prompts. Moderators are also speakers because it talks about people who are moderators, but sometimes there are actually just a lot of panels at this conference. So we were trying to massage the data to give us back, like, who are the speakers? Well, sometimes it wouldn't give us back people who are actually speakers because they were always called moderators in the text. Talks, presentations, and sessions are the same thing. Remember to answer the question. Do not ask questions. So keeping it straight there. And then whatever query we just passed in, plus the chat history. So everything I've typed previously I'm passing back in so it has more context to know what I'm talking about as I keep talking to it. And then it gives us back an answer and we rinse and repeat. So the beauty of that is, yeah, we're using that vector database to look at the prompt, whatever the person typed in, gather 15 related documents from those text files, basically that we loaded into the Chroma DB, passing all that in at once to ChatGPT-3.5, and we get those nice answers that are relative to just our content. And that's the demo. Any questions about kind of what we did there? And any questions online? We can hear you here in the room. Feel free to unmute, or if there's
Calvin.
Yeah.
You got one in the back there.
Oh, come up here. If you don't mind, come up here to the microphone. I'll make sure that is on.
Testing.
Yeah, it's on.
Yeah. Was that Chroma DB? Does that also version for you the like embeddings that presumably are updating as they're added context per prompt? So is there any versioning?
No, not
you get out of
DB. Chroma DB is pretty static once we load it.
Okay.
Like we've just got a static file. I think it's, where's the persist folder right here? Has that Chroma DB SQL-like file right in it.
So it's not even getting some like time stamped
No,
series of things.
not in this case.
Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, go ahead. Right. They probably pick you up.
I think my question was along the same lines. It says, is it doing any sort of learning as the prompts come in?
No, I mean, in this case, we're passing in the chat history, which is everything I've typed to it. We're passing it in that index so that it passes whatever number of documents we've chosen, but it's not retraining any models. It's not indexing any new data, which is actually kind of what you were asking. It's not indexing any new data into that vector database. Those are all things you could be doing. And you could also be passing all this data into a fine tunings on a model you're hosting locally, but then now you're paying train models, and vector databases are actually pretty darn powerful for this kind of a task. So we're nothing big, but it's not saying it can't be done. It's a matter of cost and time. Yeah, Nathan.
Optimization. Sounds like you do a little bit with 7 cents or 300.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, if you look up here at the top, I can change that over. You can just change that model out right here to like GPT-4, and you'll see do you know what the factor is in difference in cost by tokens?
The tokens were roughly twice as much, I think, but there's more than just tokens that are part of the cost. So that's.
Yeah, so multiple factors in addition to just the tokens.
And GPT-3.5 is faster.
Yeah, and 3.5 is way faster. Actually, here, watch. So you saw how fast it was answering those questions. We'll just tell it to use the GPT-4 model. And let's until 3.5. And quit this one. Quit. And we'll rerun this. This is now using the change I just. Oh. Uh-oh.
Do you not pay your token bill?
Apparently not. Oh, you know what? I think I actually made a typo. Yep. There we go. When I was scrolling around on the file. Let's see this now. Okay. We'll use the. Oh, slow. Come on. Here we go. Yeah, you can see a noticeable difference in speed from 3.5 turbo to 4. And that cost me, easily twice as much, or if not more, for the response.
Nope.
He wasn't speaking. No.
We had a judge was our participation.
I don't know if it picked up the panelists for the judges. No, no.
We're everywhere but nowhere. Not even your model can find us.
Yeah. But if you work with GPT-4, maybe it does suit some of your needs better, you may find better use cases for it. In our case, 3.5 was fast, cheaper, gave great results right out of the box. We were able to work with the tunings and actually get a lot out of it.
Yeah, and that was the beauty of having the multiple models, like you saw, is that we could bring in 4 to play with it for a little bit, and then actually look at the back end, because models are the tokens are like equal to like Shroot bucks. You don't know what they're really worth. So you can kind of play for a little bit, go to the model, and then flip back and forth. But that's the beauty of having a multi-model environment, is that you can do that very quickly and then optimize towards that.
Yeah.
But most users, when you give them access to this, are going to ask stupid questions. So don't spend any money on the stupid questions. Wait until they, start asking real questions.
There we go. Well, like I said, if there's more questions, happy to answer some more of those. If folks in the room have questions right now, yeah, go ahead.
So I know there's a lot of limits around tokens for input. Are there a lot of limits around the embeddings, or is there just a lot of cost around the embeddings?
Well, the embeddings are going to be broken up into tokens as well, because they're just sent along as additional context. So that's why that number of like setting it to 15, I was sending way more text up into the GPT-3.5, prompt. So it was costing more as I upped that number. You saw the default was 3, so if you were just playing with it, you wouldn't hopefully send as much, but you wouldn't get maybe as interesting answers.
So did you run into issues where you were hitting the token limit for Turbo 3.5?
We did. Not
Not with the embeddings? Okay.
They will gladly take your money. Yeah.
Well, there are some
Yeah.
token limits, but it's pretty big on 3.5 now, right? Actually, 4 got a bigger limit.
8,000.
Yeah,
If I recall
on
correctly.
3.5, right?
I think 4,000 for 3.5. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think 4's like 18 or 32 or something crazy now. So I was just curious.
Yeah, in those cases, you might want to consider then fine tuning your own models on top of the pre-existing one. What was the latest one that came out like 3 weeks ago? It was all the rage.
Llama 2, 180.
Yes, the Falcon 180B. Check that one out. It's totally kind of supposed to be as comparable to 3.5 Turbo or even close to GPT-4, and you can run it on your own infrastructure if you got enough infrastructure. Yeah, you have to have GPUs for that one. Yeah. Falcon 180B. Yeah, there's kind of an arms race in open source models now, which is interesting.
I want to know more about how Brad envisions using these in the future.
Yeah, come over here in the camera then.
This is a trap. Because Carol's been trying to get this answer out of me for like 3 months. So one of the things, so with this project, we basically ran this as a proof of concept to validate the technology. Because Calvin's right, all website search suck. And so what we want to be able to do is to provide a better experience. So this was our department, one, validating, can we even pull this off? We are currently talking with a number of product managers internally to see how this is going to get used. We've not really found, I would say, there's not a lot of users that get warm and fuzzies from thinking that they're being handled or manipulated. But if you use things like search and things like that, we think that there's a way that we can embed this. One of the ways is like the basic agronomy data is something that a lot of agronomists carry around, these little pocket guides that the universities put out. And so we think that it's probably going to be used internally first to just block and tackle those basic questions, and not call it like Clippy or, some stupid chatbot thing. But because it can block and tackle very, very well. And if you ask it things like, how do I diagnose, corn rootworm pressure, or what does root rot look like? Like, it can do that stuff very, very easily. When you start asking it, like, what date should I plant corn? Like, there's some massaging, there's still some art to it. But we're probably not going to come out. Some of our other people in ag have come out with dedicated product lines that they're calling ChatGPT-like or AI enabled. And quite frankly, they're junk. So we're probably going to try to stay away from that and just slowly embed it into a product line, either through a chat function.
Any questions online? Laura, did I miss anything in the Slack?
There are a few in the chat. Did you run into any problems related to the size of the context window?
Well, I assume that's in relationship to the tokens. I don't think we did on this project specifically for Beck's. I think it was ability to use the vector databases to narrow down that subset of content we're sending up to it. Okay, I'm scrolling back through the questions right now.
Yeah, and there was one more in the Zoom chat. Are there any reasons you use GPT-4 as Andrew Shaw had a better experience with GPT 3.5?
Yeah, I just saw that question. So I think again, the multi-model approach of being able to road test it for your use cases is really what's going to pay off here. And actually checking out other open source models. If you look at Facebook just released Llama 2, but they also released Llama 2 code. So if you're writing a code application, you probably want to go use the Llama 2 code model, open, for basically everybody but Amazon and folks to use because they're competitors. But they'll happily license it to you as a smaller fish out there, which is free for you.
Yeah, no, we loved again the idea of being able to bring different models, and the technology is going to have ebbs and flows, but our customers don't have the tolerance that we might for that kind of change, and so being able to grab and different models is going to be a strategic capability.
Yeah, I see the next question here about the website data extraction effort. That was done pre-chat. Actually, we checked in the kind of pre-populated vector database for you. But there are the tools in there in that repository that show you how we did it. We just wrote some really rudimentary things to select out specific bits from where we knew about what the content was going to look like. So that how-to is basically in there to kind of go diving in code a little bit.
The other thing, I don't know if this came up during our project, but at one time we were like dynamically referencing websites. And I think we came to the conclusion that it's better to cache a copy for the things that you brought up on the rally conference. Like webmasters screw stuff up all the time. And so in order, especially if you're going to build your own model, download your own copy and get it into your own database. Don't do a dynamic link off to a current website.
But if you do want to write kind of agents and plugins and tools, the LangChain framework has really good facilities for doing that. So you could write tools that in the LangChain kind of framework go look up stock prices or travel information or contact some API and bring that in as additional context. And you can tell the AI as you're going through that process, use these tools that are available to you, and then it can figure out how to use them in a way you got. Yeah.
Questions that be related to what you guys both just said. I'm very new to this, so these are probably basic questions, but you spoke about your clients not having a lot of tolerance. So maybe the responses they're getting, is there anything you can do to check the competence of an answer, or not show bad answers, or anything like that, score an answer maybe? And then when I had looked at this before, I was looking at doing stuff like transfer models and trying to teach a model and retrain it about your context. But this, I might have missed something in your presentation about how you're using the vector database and how you're bringing that in. If you have time, maybe after the questions to
Sure.
talk about that again, I would love to hear that.
Yeah, so in our case, it's going to be about massaging that input data that we're feeding into that vector database to get the best information passed into whatever model you're using. So if you're using GPT-3.5, ChatGPT is an implementation of GPT-3.5 or 4, depending on what you're using. That's their product. This is our product we built for the Beck's project or for the Rally site. So we get to choose how we build our vector databases and how that data gets queried and what context gets sent along whenever we make those API calls into whatever model we want to use, whether it's GPT-3.5 from OpenAI, or we want to use Orca 7B or Falcon 180 B. That's where you get to kind of start fiddling, and there's a lot of knobs to tune and twist. We didn't do any fine tuning here. This is strictly using off-the-shelf models. So the next step would be maybe we fine tune models, but then now you're training, and so you're going to be retraining. And then we got around that by saying we're going to feed into it additional context, like what were good answers to that question. So if this query of that prompt lands you on pre-existing questions that have been asked in the past, we can feed that context in with good answers, or leave out the poor answers as additional context that can be fed in as we're asking GPT-3.5 for the answer.
Yeah, and that was the critique side of what we showed early on, so that we can make sure that we ran it through its paces, found some things that were awkward, and with the critique thing, you're always getting better, right? But there's no way to be 100%. Otherwise, we'd fire all the developers. So, yeah.
All right, a couple more questions. Okay, are you also doing a prompt evaluation workflow in this application? Also, why not use Llama Index? We did use Llama Index actually in this project, right, Glenn? On Beck's side. The Rally demo did not use Llama Index. We just scrapped it. This is just LangChain. Yeah, so we've got experience with both. And I think our current experiences, we'll just stick with LangChain for the moment. Llama Index wasn't really needed. I think that's what our current. Yeah. Your mileage may vary.
LangChain and Llama Index went through multiple periods where their dependencies were not compatible, which also happened in the demo that Calvin just gave, where there's two virtual Ms in there, one for LLM and
Yeah.
one for using LangChain, because you couldn't satisfy them both at the same time. And then these things ultimately resolved for a while. Pip freeze, save that configuration, and then
Yeah. So
Well,
you'll notice there are two virtual environments in here because LangChain's dependencies are not compatible with LLM's dependencies. So the two demos actually ran out two different Python sandboxes, which is a benefit of virtual environments, but it kind of sucks when you're trying to like use them together if you wanted to. Like we couldn't use LLM in here, so that's why we ended up using just LangChain only.
Isn't there a joke there like two llamas walk into a bar?
It's zippy.
Yeah.
The bar's low.
Yeah, that's right. The bar's really low, really low.
Yeah, let's see the chat. What's in here? Do you have any views on multi-agent frameworks like Microsoft AutoGen? I have never used AutoGen. I don't know, Glenn, if you looked at AutoGen.
I haven't, but for another project we're about to do, we'll likely.
Yeah. And then the last question here, so Microsoft didn't see any of the data from the Rally script. That's not true. So I did send, as we queried the vector database, gathered up documents, we do send those up to OpenAI, as part of that. If you care, you can run your own models. That's what the GPT-4 all demo part of this was. So if you look at the GPT-4 all demo, the Orca 7B demo that's in here, that does not send any data off of your computer at all. It's all on your computer only. You could shut off the internet, turn off the Wi-Fi, and actually ask it questions all day long and get the responses with no internet. Yes, Jeff. Can I come up to the mic?
If you pay for the GPT-3 Turbo or 4 APIs, that does not feed into the OpenAI backend database.
Correct. Yes.
There's a checkbox.
Yeah, there's a checkbox. There's more controls if you're using the API. So for those of you, again, ChatGPT, when you log in and start using ChatGPT through the web, if you pay, you can tell it, don't keep my history, and it gives you kind of a private session, but it's not truly private. They keep that data for 30 days. So if you're unaware, when you check that checkbox on ChatGPT, they're still keeping the data for 30 days, and then they supposedly flush it from their system. But just like anything on the internet, once it's on the internet, I can guarantee you there's bugs in software. That's the one guarantee I'll make you today. There's bugs in software, so it's possible that it could get leaked. Whereas if you are using like the Orca 7B local, that's on your machine.
Right. You can only guarantee it if it's local and open source.
Right.
But at the very least, the claim is made.
Right. Now,
And when you use when you pay for API access, one of the things you're buying is that they don't actually absorb it in your firm.
and another thing you can pay for with the OpenAI stuff is if you're using the Azure hosted version of the API, it's supposed to have SOC 2 compliance. Like so if you care about a lot of checking those, check boxes, they've gone through that compliance effort that probably give you a report if you ask for it. And that should give you some, little comfort in that.
What kind of compliance?
I think it's SOC 2 on that one.
SOC 2, okay.
Yeah. Someone can correct me, but I'm pretty sure if you pay for the Azure version of the API as opposed to wherever they host the other one, I think it must be on AWS. Did you get that?
One of the things that Brad mentioned earlier was he liked the idea that he could have the private on his equipment
Yeah.
so that he could generate IP. But the interfaces you've shown are kind of free-form text open interfaces.
Yeah.
So if I have a free-form text open interface to say Beck's database, if I'm a customer and you give me that exposure, I can extract the IP and I can do anything I want to with it. Did you guys give any thought to how you might change the interface or protect the content to protect the IP?
So this interface was just to validate it, so that will not go live. To be honest, the exposure is probably going to be within our farming management platform that already has security controls. But again, the stuff that we did was all available on our website. Now, it's been massaged and we've refined it down. But for us, I would say the IP is not monetary. It's that we have a unique model with 23 years. So it's more of a reputation based. is what we're building in the IP there. But somebody could also, because we ingested a lot of public data from Purdue, Wisconsin, all the land grants. I mean, no one else has kind of done that yet and validated it and massaged it. So we would probably deploy it not just through an open website like this. Actually, it's behind a username and password right now. That's how we control what model that you get, and we bulk load data. So it's probably going to live behind some authentication. But yeah, a user can use it all day long and they can try to extract whatever, but they're going to have to be agronomy questions. So
Well, I could ask it. Give me all the IP that's available. That's the question.
yeah, we didn't label anything as IP though. So I mean, I'd love to ask it that question, but yeah, I don't know if you could you actually Glenn extract any of the critiques? I mean, it's not really aware of what we've labeled as a critique, is it?
No, it doesn't,
Yeah,
it
we
doesn't
didn't
know
label
about
the-
that. It also, now, what you're asking for is well beyond the context of what it's going to generate as an answer. So you're going to have to carefully ask all the right questions.
There's a lot of controversy right now about how the models have been trained in the first place, right? Scraping the entire.
Yeah.
And essentially that's what you're doing. You're adding more context. And if I have the ability to somehow ask the model to give me that context, even though you're trying to.
Well, the model doesn't have it. And it's in the vector database, so you would have to know how to query the vector database through the language to match those documents, so you can even send those to the model to consider.
Yeah, and I would say the IP that we're creating is that we're taking the language and putting it with the right data. So just because you scrape everything from the internet, not everything is usable, not everything's interpreted. And so just like when I asked it, what is an R3, how do I define R3 soybean? It's like, well, it's after R2 and before R4. Like we had to go in and say, no, the real answer is you look for 3 leaflets above the last node. Here's the data. That's the IP that we're creating, is that we're the ones doing that so that somebody doesn't link the wrong data together. So we brought context and we brought kind of an authoritative viewpoint to it. That's the quote unquote IP that we're creating. We're not creating any new information out there. We're just validating and linking it to language.
Yeah. So
That said, though, there is one of the more exciting new areas of cybersecurity is the whole AI cybersecurity, like how to get the chatbot to tell you the thing you want
Bust
to
out the
know.
prompt.
And what's the special sauce that you need to make it pass all the security limitations of it.
Well, actually, I was getting ready to bring up something really, really similar. Is that some of the value in using hosted providers is they are probably going to start institute scanning of their models, looking for malicious models that have been deployed into, like, say, Hugging Face. You go to Hugging Face, you can download any model. How do you know it doesn't have some malicious aspect that has been programmed into that model that triggers on certain phrases, keywords? Who knows what the prompt may be? I've been talking to a couple of companies that are doing that kind of work and actually partnering with groups like Hugging Face to provide that scanning of models.
Yeah, I think there's an ethics thing that hasn't really been explored yet, and we could probably talk for hours about that. But obviously, it's what do you define as malicious? I mean, if we skew the data so that if you ask what's the best hybrid, and we make sure Beck's is number 1, like, is that malicious or is it not? So there's a lot of, I think, ethics that are yet to be determined. If you're using a Beck's model, it's probably going to be skewed, right? Just like if I go to your website and ask you how your product works, you should probably recommend your own product. So what's malicious and what's not.
Right.
But
how can you do it in a friendly, potentially unbiased way?
Yep.
When you say that you're like tuning it, like to answer that R2 question correctly, is that just like taking the answer, saying answered this way, and you're adding that to your index so that when the question is asked again, it can find that and like, oh,
yeah,
this is okay.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these things like moving looking for nets. Use the same kind of strategy for doing like analytical type questions, like your source data is
Like tabular number type, analytic data.
just a good pattern to follow for that, or is there something else you recommend?
So
I don't know if I use an LLM, but
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah,
that's not there
that's-
too. That.
it's not going to do like a mathematical calculation. Like if you give it a bunch of financial data and ask it, what's the net worth of this company? It's not going to like automatically calculate that unless there's explicit language that says the net worth of this company is blah, 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 blah. So
Like what things mean or.
yeah, it's not going to like do a mathematical calculation.
Now,
based on-
now the new, chat, if you go to ChatGPT, it's got the new code evaluation tools built into it. You can say, here's a pointer to CSV files, load those into a data frame, produce some things. Yeah. That's probably what it can do for you. And then now it can spit out graphics, which is kind of nice too.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine a model that has every single IRS tax return in it?
Oh my God.
Oh, the questions I would ask.
Yeah, no kidding.
Glenn, we're gonna work on that next.
Any other questions online or otherwise? We still got quite a good crowd online. Okay, we have more questions and we'll do 2 more questions and then we'll do the drawing. Go ahead. Actually, David, you want to ask?
Sure. When you switched from the 3.5 turbo to 4, did you have to change what embeddings you're using?
No, I use the same vector database to send that context along. All I changed was what model gets called into the chain.
Okay. If you were to switch to Orca, would that be different than the OpenAI one?
Yeah. I mean, we could just use, we don't have a way to use the Orca on that one right now, do we? The LLM's not using that example.
Yeah, you want to use their embedding service with their.
Yeah, so LangChain
Well,
had
service.
that built into the framework for us.
Okay.
So if LangChain supports whatever models, you can now swap in those models.
But the embeddings are unique per model you're using?
Roughly, yeah, per service.
Okay.
Cool. Right, come on up, ask more questions.
All right, so kind of 2-pointed question. It's frustrating to see. Yeah, I was going to ask about the Llama Index migration myself, but it seems like that's just one of many casualties about the hardware fragmentation. We're building all these custom accelerators, and so that's just downstream. But I'm curious, given the time now that you both have invested learning about some of the tools available in this ecosystem, feel like some of the low-hanging fruit that you're looking forward to seeing solved in the next year in the broader ecosystem in terms of tooling that's available? And what are the non-low hanging fruit, the far real dream, like if you had a magic wand, things you'd love to see introduced into the ecosystem?
I feel like Glenn answer that because he's been doing more thinking than me.
I don't want to touch any of that.
I don't know. I'm thinking from a low hanging fruit. What I think is going to improve is the frameworks are evolving to make this even easier and easier and easier to do.
Yeah.
So that it should be, if everyone's here ever used URL versus requests, it should be requests easy to be able to do these kinds of operations.
The difficulty halves, it feels like every month.
Yeah.
Like what I did in July, I could do in a quarter of the time today.
Yeah, so the usability, I think, of the tooling is what's the real driver and getting us a lot of innovation right now. The non-low hanging fruit, I mean, make it easy to fine tune models, make that easy to throw those up and train them someplace.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Or just.
Well, I'm not a
do
developer, but I
availability.
mean,
just want
the
to-
data extraction, I think was fairly, like that took the most amount of time to figure out how in the world we're going to extract data. So as a non-developer, I think, it's got to be as easy as dragging in a Google Drive or, the click and pull or whatever. It has to be that easy. And it's just, I know we went through a lot of
It's
manual
getting
work.
easier. I'm already doing it better than I did then.
Yes.
It's definitely evolving pretty quickly. It'd be nice, I guess, on wish lists if it would stabilize. Like, could we just reach a point where I don't have to rip it all out and do it again 3 weeks later?
Yeah, you're going to want flexibility in your application because it's going to change in 3 weeks.
Okay.